How wonderful it is to see such a large attendance for an integrated ocean and an oceans summit with conversations that are globally relevant. And to all our distinguished guests, may I especially welcome our 32 visitors from all over the islands of this planet. And like us, we no longer consider you small island states. Like us, you are large ocean states. It is a great pleasure now to introduce the first man of Cork, the newly minted Lord Mayor John Sheehan, who became Lord Mayor on Friday evening and who has had an immersion in oceans. He has said to me he wishes every weekend will be as good as this. Lord Mayor John Sheehan, please.
Thank you very much, and certainly I do hope every weekend is as interesting and as exciting as this weekend. Last evening I had the honour and privilege of welcoming you to the summit here at our Ocean Wealth, and I spoke at that time about the motto that is of our city, Cork, which has a strong, rich maritime history, and its motto is a safe harbour for ships, and I think that just emphasises the long connection that this area, this city and this region has with the oceans through its trading, through its link with the sea, both locally, nationally and internationally. So I think it's very apt that we're privileged here to host the summit here today, our Ocean Wealth. I'd like to welcome you all, and in particular I'd like to give a special Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes to the representatives of the small island developing states who have travelled long distances to be here today, so you're very, very welcome. Ireland, as a small nation at the edge of Europe, has much to learn and much in common with you, and I hope that today we will strengthen those bonds. In Ireland we have a saying, your health is your wealth, and I think it is only through the sustainable management of our oceans that we are able to lead forward to a sustainable development in the future. So I hope today's conference and summit will help forge those links and strengthen those bonds, and I wish you a very successful summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's now a great privilege to introduce a man I have grown to deeply respect. Over the number of years he has been Minister for Agriculture, Food, and the important bit comes next, Marine. He is a man who comes from this county of Cork, from the northern part of the county. The county is so large that part of the county has very little coastline. A man who has been touched by the ocean. And the strange thing about the ocean is when it touches you, it will not let go. And I have to say, from the perspective of someone leading a research agency for the government, his passion for the ocean has become very evident. That's demonstrated in action. We are enjoying the largest funding in the history of the Irish state for marine research and integrated knowledge creation. A large amount of that is coming from a reformed common fisheries policy in Europe, which is the engine now for the largest research efforts that are being undertaken in an integrated manner on this planet every week, not only in studying fish stocks, but in understanding the ecosystem and the global challenges, and enabling a degree of integrated science to happen in this country that I could have only dreamed of as a kid and as a student in university here. He has also given us and won the government support for the building of a new national research vessel. Actions are what the world needs now, as we will hear throughout the day from a number of keynote speakers. Well, I can say Michael Creed, as Minister of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, has been a man of action. Michael.
Thank you very much, Peter. Lord Mayor, Taoiseach, Minister English, distinguished international guests, Secretary Kerry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm truly delighted to be here in the historic Cork City Hall this morning to officially open the 2019 Ocean Wealth Summit, which has truly become an international event. I would like to warmly welcome the many distinguished guests from the small island developing nations in particular here to Cork. I trust that you have enjoyed some Irish hospitality over the weekend and had an opportunity to experience Seafest, our national maritime festival. This city of Cork has a long and distinguished maritime history, situated as it is beside one of the largest natural harbours in the world, so it was the perfect venue to host this year's Seafest. Almost half of all Irish people live within 5 kilometres of the coastline, so it is only right that we celebrate this maritime tradition and affinity with the sea. From humble beginnings, Seafest has grown to become one of Ireland's finest free public festivals, celebrating all things maritime. The success of Seafest is down to the efforts of so many committed people, too numerous to mention here, but a special mention must go to the Marine Institute, who are the engine of both the festival and the summit. The Marine Institute, with the help of many others, including my own department, Bord Iascaigh Mhara, Enterprise Ireland, the Naval Service and many others, have shown great commitment to growing Seafest, cultivating a stronger relationship between the Irish public and the ocean. A special thanks this year to all here at Cork City Hall, led by City Manager Anne Doherty and her team, for taking on the considerable challenge of successfully relocating Seafest and the summit to Cork, where it will now be located for the next 3 years. Today's conference is about a global perspective on the collective challenges we are posing for the ocean, the challenges the ocean poses for humanity, and the collective solutions humanity can put in place to address those challenges. However, before we deal with those key central themes, I want to update you quickly on the very positive latest economic marine trends here in Ireland. The Irish Ocean Economy Report, published by the National University of Ireland, Galway, for today's summit, provides the most up-to-date information on blue growth, on sustainable blue growth in the Irish economy. The report shows that in 2018, Ireland's sustainable ocean economy had a turnover of 6.2 billion euros, providing full-time employment for over 34,000 people. The direct economic contribution, as measured by gross value added, was 2.2 billion euros, or 1.1% of GDP. Taken together with the indirect economic contribution of the marine, the value of the Irish ocean economy is now 4.19 billion, or 2% of total GDP. Over the last 2 years, there has been an incredible growth in the sector, with a 13% increase in turnover, an 11% increase in gross value added, and a 13% increase in employment. When we published the Government Integrated Plan for the Marine, Harvesting Our Ocean Wealth, we set ourselves very ambitious targets. If these positive trends continue, the original targets for 2020 will be well exceeded. Reporting just 1 month ago, the European Commission identified the most significant expansion and growth in the blue economy was in both Ireland and Malta. I'm delighted to welcome the Maltese Minister for Foreign Affairs here also to the summit. This is indicative of a bright future emerging for the marine economy. This success is being driven by many established and emerging innovative Irish marine businesses, facilitated in no small way by the ongoing work of the Interdepartmental Marine Coordination Group. To support this progress made by the marine sector, the Government has in recent weeks approved a marine planning policy statement which sets out the reforms underway to provide a modern, integrated marine planning system. A marine planning and development bill is also in preparation and will sit alongside a maritime jurisdiction bill and the National Marine Planning Framework. Together, these measures will provide a new fit-for-purpose framework for the sustainable management of the sector in the decades ahead. Turning to the global context, the foundation for a thriving marine economy is the sustainability of our seas and the wider ocean that we all share. Our ocean knows no national or international boundaries. Climate change is the key test of our time, affecting all our island and coastal states equally. This morning you will hear from one of the world's leading pioneers in terms of protecting our oceans and our seas. The widely respected former Secretary of State John Kerry has been at the forefront of this issue, providing global leadership at the very time when that leadership was most in need. Secretary Kerry has played a major role in ensuring the growing global acceptance of the reality of the impacts of climate change on our shared ocean, and has also driven a sharp focus on the need for solutions and actions to address those pressing challenges. We welcome Secretary Kerry and all our distinguished speakers and contributors, particularly those from the small island developing nations whose voices are critical to understanding the challenges that we face. As a small island on the western seaboard of Europe, washed by the North Atlantic drift, Ireland's climate variability is predominantly maritime influenced. Like other island nations, Ireland is particularly vulnerable to oceanic changes resulting from climate change. It is for these reasons that we feel a particular empathy towards the small island developing nations of the world and the common ocean challenges that we must all face together. Ireland is currently finalising a whole-of-government approach to climate change action and adaptation. My department has specific responsibility for the seafood sector as well as for agriculture and forestry in this context. While this focus on climate change domestically is essential, I am acutely conscious that it must be supported by a collective effort of the nations of the world working together. This is particularly the case with regard to the ocean. As Minister with responsibility for seafood, I am particularly interested in the potential impact of climate change on fisheries and aquaculture. 10% of the world population depends on fisheries for their livelihoods, and 4.3 billion people are reliant on fish for 15% of their animal protein intake. In a world where global population is increasing by 82 million people per year, every year, it is a reality that an increasing number of people will be reliant on protein from our ocean in the coming decades. A risk to sustainable seafood production from the ocean poses serious concerns for a significant proportion of the global population. The most obvious pressure on our seafood production derives from temperature changes and acidification, although changes in salinity, sea level, current patterns and extreme weather events will also affect fisheries and aquaculture. Warming ocean temperatures from climate change are driving many marine species towards the poles. These changes are likely to continue to impact on global commercial fisheries. Overfishing will exacerbate these problems. A continued and intensified focus on adaptation, climate action measures, and the sustainable management of our fish stocks will be central to the continuation of a sustainable supply of seafood and global food security for a growing world population in the coming years. Another great challenge we face in the ocean is the issue of marine pollution from plastics and other sources. 80% of marine debris is made from plastic. Plastics pose a serious problem for marine ecosystems. This year I launched Ireland's Clean Oceans Initiative, working with our fishing trawlers to sieve and retrieve daily waste plastic from the ocean. We will hear more on this initiative during the day, and I hope that with your help we can grow and expand this effort across the island and indeed globally. Over the last year, in particular, a new and effective leadership front has emerged on the climate change issue. Our highly motivated younger generation, some of whom you will hear from today. While the words and actions of the next generation point to the immediacy of the threat we are facing, their words also offer tentative hope. That tentative optimism, while not underestimating the scale of the challenge ahead, must inform our actions now and in the immediate future. For that reason, we will be hearing from our young ambassadors here today. It is critical that we continue to listen to those voices to build a future for the generations who succeed the current leaders. I believe that the majority of people now accept the very significant threat which climate change poses to the future of the ocean. There can be no prevarication in terms of the reality we are now facing. It is the most challenging issue for the modern world. No country is or will be immune from the threat. Therefore, the solutions must by default be locally enacted but globally based. This is an era when political and business leaders and wider society will be judged on our actions, not words, on results, not ambitions. None of us here in City Hall this morning can claim to have all of the answers to the challenges facing our ocean. However, collectively across the globe, if we are to properly come to grips with this issue, it will mean taking tough and in some cases life-changing decisions. These necessary changes present difficulties but also encompass endless opportunity. The central theme of today's summit is shared voices from small island nations. I am confident that by sharing and listening to each other's experiences and reflecting on those shared voices, we can contribute to the next steps in the journey to a new era where the sustainable health of our shared ocean takes centre stage. I wish everybody an enjoyable and thought-provoking day, together building a better future for the small island developing nations of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Now we're going to have a voice from the private sector. Over the last 3 years, including this, PwC, today represented by Declan McDonald, have come on board as a sponsor of this new summit initiative in Ireland. And indeed, if we are to address and tackle and take the action that is necessary to deal with the ocean issues, there's a very, very large role for private sector, for blue financing, blue bonds, as we heard from the President of the Seychelles on Saturday. And having friends like Declan who can help with that voice, help with that convincing, help with that mobilisation is very important. Declan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, distinguished guests, Secretary Kerry, and a special welcome to our overseas visitors from the island nations. We're delighted to be back here again. It's our third year sponsoring the event. I think it's encouraging to see the event move to a more international footing this year. As an international organisation ourselves, we operate in 158 countries with 250,000 people, and we understand that the decisions and actions that we take in one part of our organisation directly impacts our colleagues in other parts of the world. And in the same way, we have to recognise that our island is connected to islands globally by ocean currents, and oceans without borders or barriers. And actions, or probably more pertinently inaction, that we take in relation to climate change has a direct impact on people not just here, but everywhere. And I was lucky enough to sit in yesterday in a conversation that the Taoiseach had with some of the representatives of the SIDS. And it's humbling to hear some of the challenges and real issues facing those nations. And certainly if anybody has any doubt in relation to the impact climate change is having, they need to spend some time with these people. I want to talk to you a little bit about the role business has to play in tackling these substantial challenges we have. And just as an intro to that, I want to play a very short video that our colleagues in PwC Australia have produced. In macroeconomic terms, I think the world is becoming a wealthier place. Successive generations are creating more wealth than their predecessors, and with that increased prosperity comes increased demand and consumption, together with the increased energy and waste associated with that. And as has been mentioned, increased prosperity and increased population is placing huge demands on our planet. And clearly as consumers, we all have a role to play in trying to live our lives in more sustainable ways. We've left behind a lot of the ways of our previous generations in favour of increased leisure time and convenience. Our parents' generations and those before them were upcycling and recycling before those terms were commonplace. They created less waste, they travelled less, they tread lightly on their environment at a time when we never even knew what climate change was. But our world's a different place now. We've burgeoning middle classes with more disposable income and conspicuous consumption. And convenient consumption abounds, together with a throwaway mentality in many of our societies. But what hasn't changed over the generations is that parents still want the best for their children and their children's children. They want prosperous lives for them. But I think what we all have to ask ourselves is what prosperity looks like for those generations. Business has a massive role to play in this, in satisfying that demand in sustainable ways, in the way it uses energy, in the way it uses raw materials to produce those goods, and the way those goods are shipped and packaged. And as I said, as consumers, we can all make positive changes in the way we live, but to really make serious, impactful change, to try and halt and indeed reverse some of the damage that human activity has done to the planet, we need business to react to that and react quickly. Prosperity is going to have to be redefined. It's no longer enough for business to measure success in purely financial terms. The responsible behaviours in achieving those financial outcomes are important and arguably more important than those outcomes themselves. Traditional and economic models are going to be challenged, and they'll have to adapt. We've got a situation where perpetual economic growth coupled with a planet with finite resources is an equation that just doesn't balance, and it'll have to be addressed. And business has to measure its influence on the society it depends on, together with the environmental resources it exploits. Its natural capital needs to be accounted for. Climate change is no longer just a risk management issue for business. It's something that needs to be brought into the strategy. Sustainability has to be part of business strategy going forward, and business's response to sustainable development issues will inform its strategic direction in the future. Because quite simply, business needs a thriving society in a thriving environment to function. And as I said, humanity needs business to solve large-scale problems. And I think the reality is, if businesses don't build sustainability into their strategic focus, they themselves will struggle to survive. Current and future generations are going to make choices about the type of products they want to purchase and from the type of companies and businesses they'll purchase from. And future generations will make choices about the type of companies and businesses they want to work in. And unless business embraces sustainability in a culture and ethos, they'll lose customers and they won't attract the best talent. And in recent times, we've seen school kids take to the street to express their concerns about the legacy our generation are leaving them. And we've seen a wave of support for green politics in recent elections. The millennials and Gen Zs coming behind us will have a different view of business and prosperity to the way perhaps past generations have viewed it. Now, PwC are in the prosperity business. We exist to create prosperity for our people. We provide services to our clients to help their businesses to prosper. But as with all other businesses, we have to reassess what success looks like. We have to see in the future how we measure and regard what prosperity actually is. You'll have seen in the short video there a mention of purpose and solving societal problems. Our firm has set out a defined purpose for our people globally to build trust in society and solve important problems. And we've developed a set of values and behaviours around that to try and achieve our purpose. And I think one can be cynical about big business and purpose statements and mission statements and that kind of thing. But I really do think there's change afoot. There's a real coming together of the sustainability agenda and business performance. And the reality is, for a business like ours, we're one of the biggest graduate recruiters in the country. Those graduates are asking us, what is our purpose beyond revenues and profits? What are we doing about some of the significant challenges facing the planet? So we have no choice but to stitch this in to the way we run our business. And we're trying to embed a set of behaviours and values around how we serve our clients and how to better run our business. And we recognise that culture and ethos has to be part of what demonstrates that purpose. In terms of practical initiatives that are happening, I just want to mention a couple of things before I finish, both on a local and a global level. This week we'll be launching our Low Carbon Pledge Report, which is an initiative with Business in the Community Ireland. And we're one of 50-odd companies in the country who are pledging to significantly reduce our carbon footprint in the next decade. And that's consistent with what's happening throughout the PwC network worldwide. And I just want to mention a really exciting global initiative which is launching later this month. Many of you will be familiar with the Netflix documentary Our Planet, narrated by Sir David Attenborough. And I understand it's currently trending as one of the top shows on Netflix, having been watched by over 190 million people worldwide. PwC has been collaborating with the World Wildlife Fund and Silverback Productions on this to produce a film called Our Planet, Our Business. And it's a corporate edit of that documentary aimed at businesses. And the film explores the value of the natural world to our economies. It looks at the scale of the challenges we face, and it looks at the critical role that business can play in creating solutions of scale. It's aimed at the highest levels in business and government globally, and the World Wildlife Fund have set a very ambitious target to get it in front of 1 billion people on the planet. We had a preview in the office last week. It's pretty hard-hitting. It's pretty powerful stuff. It's just about short of an hour, I think. It sets out effectively the damage that we've done to the planet in what is a relatively short space of time. It's very thought-provoking, I think, in terms of those business models I alluded to earlier and how future generations are going to view prosperity. But there's hope there clearly as well, because I think human ingenuity, we do have the capacity to solve these problems. It's a question of doing it fast and doing it in the right way. As I say, that launches on the 24th of June, and if you'd like to register any interest, please visit my colleagues out front there who happily take your details. And actually, just when I mention my colleagues, I'd just like to give a bit of a shout out to the PwC team who some of them give up their weekends to support this event and have really got behind it, and I'd just like to say thanks to them. So I'm going to finish on that note, and I think we have a really interesting day ahead, and I hope you enjoy it and get a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Declan. And I know Declan will accept the challenge to be a voice and a man of action in the private sector, to take on the challenges and to take on what is really needed in the private sector going forward. And I know the ocean has touched him already, and it's not going to let go of Declan. I'm now delighted to move for our visitors again to an area where our minister, next speaker, comes from. It's just slightly north of the airport where you landed, if you can remember, early Saturday morning. And Minister Damien English has responsibility for the largest estate in Ireland in terms of spatial planning. He has responsibility for an acreage that's in excess of 220 million acres. And he has the small task of ensuring that a very sensible, strategic, spatial approach is evolved to deal with that challenge. I've known Damien since he was Minister for Science, and he has been a great supporter of science and science initiatives in Ireland and at a European level. And it is a great pleasure to introduce Minister Damien English.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for that kind introduction. I get a big head now. Lucky enough, I'm part of a large department, and I'm only the junior minister. We have a senior minister to manage all that portfolio of land and marine space as well. It's a great honour to be here at this event, the 7th Summit, our Ocean Wealth Summit, and it's important that we have this opportunity to come together, both of people from Ireland and from all over the world and all the different small islands are represented here today, that we come and have this conversation to discuss and consider and celebrate marine and ocean matters with all of the expertise part of that as well in that discussion, that we have that chance to share that information as well. So everyone's very welcome here today, especially our Taoiseach, Minister Creed, Secretary Kerry, our new Lord Mayor, our distinguished international and Irish guests, ladies and gentlemen, and our first Vice President of the European Parliament, Ray McGuinness as well, and all our other colleagues who are here today to share in this opportunity, again, to share information and to learn from each other and to make plans for the present and for the future as well. Just before I go on to the main reason I'm here, which is from a planning point of view, because I'm in the Department now of Planning, working along with Minister Owen Murphy there and many others as well, trying to shape where we are with terrestrial planning, but more importantly from a marine planning point of view as well. And it was referenced this morning that the political system, our Taoiseach mentioned this morning, that the political system doesn't always make long-term decisions, and it's important that we change that mentality and that we do start making long-term decisions. And we are trying to, under a marine spatial strategy that we're working on at the moment, to look ahead to 2040 and well beyond. Certainly from a terrestrial point of view as well, we're doing the same. We've just published a Planning 2040 as well, that long-term thinking. Because we do believe, and I've referenced this point before, that when you talk about planning, what is it all about? And really what it's about is about bringing our future into the present so that we can do something about it. And that's the key part, that all of us, because it was asked this morning by Secretary Kerry and many others, what can we do and what are we doing about the future? And it's most important that we bring it into today's times, into the present, that we can really try and shape what we do now and shape our decision making for the future as well. So that's what we're trying to do here, to get that long-term thinking, to bring about the solutions we need to how we manage our oceans and our seas and our environment in general as well. But from a science point of view, and Peter touched on that, my previous role was working on the science area, and certainly from a research point of view, and it's so important that all our decision making now is based on evidence. And we will get that through research and development, through innovation, and through working together. And Horizon 2020 was mentioned in one of the earlier videos. It's so important that we have programs like that, which is an 80 billion spend, investing in R&D, investing in people, investing in our skilled people coming together to work together as teams. And in Declan's speech just earlier on as well, and in his video, you have a message up there, Declan, about Together We Solve. And again, through that research brief, through that Horizon 2020, we are bringing the best scientists, the best researchers together from the public system, from all of our governments, from all our educational institutes, together with all those in business as well, to work together on many projects to develop technologies and solutions that affect all of us, but certainly affect our marine environment and our oceans and how we manage that well into the future. So there was great progress there. And again, it was referenced this morning, we might not have all the answers yet, or it's an evolving, but certainly if we keep investing in research and development, we can use to the best evidence we have today, and we evolve with that in the years ahead as well. But we're constantly looking for new ideas, new solutions, new ways to manage what we have, and that's what we're trying to do. We have to continue with that as well. And I think as many nations here, and certainly many small island nations coming together, we work best when we pool our resources together, and that's how we will make a real change, and that's what we're trying to do. This year's event has a strong focus on the particular marine challenges that small island nations face, and on how our interactions with the seas that surround our island nations shape our cultures, our histories, our societies, our environments and our economies, and how we manage that in a sustainable way. My job as the Minister from the Planning Department is to talk today about the planning changes we're making in this whole area, to update a lot of our Irish stakeholders what's happening to the planning changes, and how we're beginning to move that forward in the right direction, but also to share what we're trying to do with our colleagues from all over the world as well. It's a great opportunity to do that as well. I want to use my time today to talk about the way Ireland is fundamentally reforming the way it manages, enjoys, protects and uses the seas that surround our island nation in a sustainable way. We are, and again, a big part of our document, Harnessing Our Ocean Wealth, was about developing a business-friendly yet robust governance policy and planning framework to make sure we're looking at all the ways we're using our seas, using our oceans, but to make sure it's in a sustainable way that everybody can benefit and that we can get that and manage that right. The benefits of Ireland's marine cannot be overstated to our physical and mental health, our heritage, our culture, our history and our wealth. Yet for too long our policy and our regulatory approach to this incredible asset has been fragmented, sectorial and demand-driven, and certainly was not always in a sustainable way. Regulatory decision-making has been spread across multiple public bodies, always well-intentioned and acting in the public interest, but not always acting in a coordinated way, and very often left without any overarching direction or strategic priorities. Harnessing Our Ocean Wealth marked an important change published back in 2012 by our Taoiseach. It recognised the problems we face with our fragmented system. It identified the need for greater integration, enhanced coordination, founded on a long-term vision and on an efficient decision-making process, backed by a robust system for ensuring compliance with decisions made, and to make sure that we are harnessing our ocean wealth in an extremely sustainable way. Without saying it in many words, harnessing our ocean wealth identified for us in Ireland the lack of and the need for an integrated marine planning system. All good planning systems have three components or building blocks. These are forward planning, development management, and most importantly, enforcement. In Ireland, our land planning system has clearly three defined components. Our national planning framework sits at the top of the forward planning hierarchy, above the regional assembly spatial and economic strategies, which then feed into local authority, city and county development plans, which in turn inform local area plans. The development management system is operated by local planning authorities, and on board Penola, while responsibility for enforcement is split between local authorities and the Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government, and more importantly, the Office of the Planning Regulator, which is the new office we've set up here in the last few months. A fit-for-purpose, holistic marine planning system should also comprise these three elements of marine forward planning, marine development, and marine management and enforcement. As we currently have no forward plan, we have numerous development management processes, some based on legislation that has not been significantly modernised in almost 90 years. And we have a complex enforcement landscape that does not always deliver the right outcomes. Thankfully, and rightly so, all that is now changing. Today, I am announcing, along with the Taoiseach and Minister of Agriculture, Food and Marine, on behalf of the Government, a marine planning policy statement for public consultation, and as a whole of government approach. The policy statement is a true recognition of the importance of a fully integrated marine planning system across all aspects of marine forward planning, marine development management, and marine planning enforcement. The policy statement describes the existing components of Ireland's marine planning system, outlines a vision for the future development of a marine planning system, sets out the overarching policies and principles our government expects marine planning bodies and other public bodies that engage with the marine planning system to observe, in terms of, for example, public engagement, transparency, governance, environmental assessment, climate action, social and economic benefit. It sets out high-level priorities for the enhancement of the marine planning system in Ireland. The statement details a number of initiatives underway that will radically transform and modernise Ireland's marine planning system so that it is more integrated, fully plan-led, which is key, clearly structured and user-friendly for all marine stakeholders. The introduction of a new national marine plan, the National Marine Planning Framework, will be a critical part of effecting this transition. The plan will ensure that the marine planning system is fully plan-led with clear direction for all sectors, proper integration of environmental, economic and social considerations, and based on extensive public and stakeholder engagement and consultation to ensure long-term buy-in from our citizens. And it's also key that we get long-term political buy-in, because we all know governments can change and governments can come and go. So it's important that we get that cross-party buy-in, and that's what we're going out of our way to achieve. And there's a great response to that as well. This marine plan will be the citizens' plan and will be our own country's plan. The first draft plan will be published in the third quarter of this year, and again it will be published for a 3-month period of public consultation and discussion. The Marine Planning and Development Management Bill, formerly known as the MAFA Bill, will be another key building block. This will introduce powers to put in place statutory marine planning guidelines, to provide an enhanced statutory basis for marine forward planning, to introduce a single state consent system for the marine area for certain project types. That's certainly needed for a lot of people who are trying to develop in a sustainable way new projects using our seas and our oceans. To eliminate the unnecessary duplication of development management processes, including environmental assessments, for activities or developments that are currently assessed under both the foreshore and planning regimes, and also to introduce a single development management and enforcement process for certain project types, including offshore renewable energy development. By bringing together these elements of forward planning and streamlined development management and enforcement, this new legislation will be a cornerstone of the future marine planning system in Ireland, and we intend to publish its revised general scheme shortly in the month of July. The Maritime Jurisdiction Bill, which comes within the remit of the Taoiseach, will complement the Marine Planning and Development Management Bill and provide an important basis for enforcing the marine planning system into the future. That bill will revise and consolidate the state's maritime jurisdiction law. In particular, it will define the state's different maritime zones and provide for the delineation of their limits. The bill will also set out in detail the rights of the state in each zone and provide for the exercise of the state's civil and criminal jurisdiction in each zone in accordance with international law. In terms of a marine environment and ocean health, the objective of ensuring that the Ireland seas are both clean and healthy and sustainably used is at the heart of the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. The obligation to achieve or maintain good environmental status under the Marine Strategy Framework Directive and obligations under other environmental laws, such as the Water Framework Directive and the Habitats Directive, can be and will be supported through a well-functioning marine planning system. The allocation of space to human activities through a marine planning system at levels of activity that ensure a sustainable use of the environment and the utilisation of the ecosystem approach to management support to these overarching objectives. A proper marine planning system will also serve to deliver Ireland's commitments and obligations under the OSPAR Convention, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. As part of realising the vision for an integrated marine planning system, the Government is also committed to strengthening and rationalising the enforcement network and framework. While a number of enforcement processes exist and operate under different legislative codes, we are all joint custodians of the marine planning system. So the introduction of a single development consent process under the Marine Planning and Development Management Bill will have some rationalising effect on enforcement mechanisms, but the Government is committed to examining options for marine planning enforcement that will place a strong emphasis on clear compliance obligations flowing from a clearly articulated decision framework, ultimately based upon the marine planning policies and objectives set out in the National Marine Planning Framework. The need for consent holders to demonstrate and to prove compliance, the collaboration between bodies with marine planning responsibilities with an emphasis on cross-compliance, the sharing of information, expertise and resources where appropriate, and a flexible approach to deploying enforcement resources, taking account of geographical as well as functional capacity. So, ladies and gentlemen, this marine planning policy is intended to lay out the key priorities for Ireland's marine planning system as we move forward in this process and take that long-term view. Our intention is to bring the marine planning into the mainstream of government functions while delivering the necessary structures to complete an integrated system. The Marine Policy Statement will underpin the operation of our cohesive planning system and play a central role in helping us achieve that. Details on how to get involved and to offer your input to the final policy statement are available on my department's website through the Marine Spatial Planning Twitter handle. And it's so important that many in this room get involved in that process. We've already undertook, probably over the last 7 or 8 months, an opportunity to go around the country to engage with as many interested stakeholders as we could. But we genuinely want to reach out. We want everybody to be involved in this, because this has to be our plan, the citizens' plan. So again, I want to thank everyone today, both our international visitors and our local stakeholders, and I want to thank you all for your time and for your attention today. I look forward, along with my colleagues, to updating you on our reform programme when we gather here in Cork next year for the European Maritime Day as well. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks for taking the time for us.
Thank you, Minister. On all our behalves, may I wish you fair sailing with that incredibly important spatial planning system. And I hope to our visitors you can get a sense of the genuine integrated approach that Ireland is building on when it comes to marine matters, because it is all connected. And on the theme of it all being connected, we are on a planet, and on this planet we have but one ocean, and that ocean is shared by all. And now it is time for us to listen to voices from some of those sister island nations, large ocean states, who have a very important voice to hear. It has been an absolute humbling and privileged experience to share a weekend with the voices from all around the planet. And it is my extreme honour to first introduce Her Excellency Ambassador Olai from Palau to share some thoughts with us.
Lord Mayor, Taoiseach, Minister Creed, Secretary Kerry, Ministers, Excellencies, Ambassador Geraldine, colleagues, distinguished delegates, fellow children of the ocean, and let me say a shout out to our youth ocean and climate ambassador, Selena from the Marshall Islands. Thank you for joining us. Ali, and good morning. At the outset, let me thank the Government of Ireland for the invitation to be here today, and to the City of Cork for your hospitality and welcome. The world has just marked World Ocean Day, and we appreciate your inclusion of small island states in your celebration of the ocean. Our being here creates new opportunities to share experiences, strengthen our partnership towards harnessing our ocean wealth in our communities as well as at the global level. Ireland is a long way from my home, Palau. A little less so for my brothers and sisters from the African, Indian, Mediterranean, and South China Sea oceans, and a little more less so for those from the Caribbean, but a long way nonetheless. But there is actually an important area of commonality between us. Ireland, when her marine and seabed area is taken into account, is actually the third largest EU state, with jurisdiction of a marine area some 10 times greater than her land area. This is a familiar situation for small island developing states. While we may be small islands with populations that could fit into a few Irish counties or even towns, our exclusive economic zones provide us with the capacity to govern, manage, and benefit from an ocean area that is also many times our land area. We are, in fact, not small island states, but large ocean states. When we recognize this, we will see new opportunities for our citizens to benefit from thriving ocean economies. We will also see new responsibilities to ensure that these benefits can be harnessed for generations to come. As Ireland has recognized, sustainable development depends on harnessing our ocean wealth. But while the ocean has been making headlines recently, this has not always been for the reasons that we would want. Instead, we are confronted with the worrying news about the impacts on marine life of pollution, climate change, and overfishing. These impacts in turn diminish our ability to harness our ocean wealth, These impacts remind us that harnessing ocean wealth will only be possible if we sustain and conserve our ocean health. These impacts remind us that ocean production and ocean protection go hand in hand. Navigating these will require us to learn from each other, to work with each other, and to journey together with each other as partners in a transition towards a sustainable ocean economy. All of us from island states, our Irish host included, know that sustaining ocean wealth is essential to our economic futures. Indeed, the ocean is not just a source of economic wealth, but of cultural wealth to our histories, identities, and futures. These last 2 days, we have witnessed how Ireland is harnessing her ocean wealth by thinking globally but acting locally, weaving a community of fabric the wild Atlantic way. I want to highlight 3 ways in which Palau is trying to strike this balance in its own pristine paradise way. 7 months from now, the Palau National Marine Sanctuary enters into force. This creates a no-take marine protected area that will be 500,000 square kilometers in size, 80% of Palau's exclusive economic zone. Our ambition is that the sanctuary represents this balance between ocean wealth and ocean health. Ocean science tells us that marine protected areas are one of the most effective tools available to sustain marine biodiversity. Marine protected areas safeguard ocean health, but for Palau, they also safeguard our ocean wealth. By ensuring that the marine tourism sector, the biggest part of our ocean economy, will continue to have a future. Sharks, turtles, and reefs are all worth more alive than dead, and overexploitation today would undermine our economic futures tomorrow. But making the sanctuary a reality next year is not a journey for Palau alone. It is a shared journey, one that has been possible through building partnerships with entrepreneurs and innovators from all over the world. Secondly, our respective island regions. A critical factor to journeying together has been to establish a shared vision, and with it, shared lessons and support. For instance, the Palau National Vision of the Palau Sanctuary was established in a broader context of a regional goal to increase marine protected area coverage. In 2007, we spearheaded the Micronesian Challenge in my part of the Pacific that inspired the Caribbean Challenge among our Caribbean brothers and sisters, reaching out to the Indian Ocean, inspiring the Indian Ocean Challenge, and has a domino effect to Hawaii, creating the Aloha Plus Challenge. These initiatives began over a decade ago through the leadership of Palau, Seychelles, and Grenada, and established the Global Island Partnership Platform for network sharing and partnerships. From the beginning, they included not just governments, but the private sector, local civil society, global conservation NGOs, our development partners, and philanthropic foundations. The progress that we have made in turning our regions into world leaders in protecting marine area coverage has only been made possible through partnerships and shared efforts. So partnership and journeying together is what lies ahead of us too. This balance of ocean wealth and ocean health is at the center of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, co-chaired by my president, with a dozen heads of state participating on the panel. The panel's mission is to chart a new course for humanity's relationship with the ocean. The panel recognizes that business as usual cannot continue, and that achieving this balance between ocean wealth and ocean health is a concern for all humanity. The panel will highlight innovations and practices that can be scaled up to begin to reset humanity's relationship with the ocean and achieve this balance. These will address all areas of blue economy, managing coastal development, to generating sustainable ocean financing models and catalyzing waves of action. And later this year, the Secretary General's Climate Summit, the panel will also be producing a series of ocean-oriented recommendations on actions that can catalyze climate ambition through ocean action. Thirdly, this journey continues into next year and beyond. The panel's recommendations on what the world needs to transition to a sustainable ocean economy will be produced at the 2020 UN Ocean Conference in Portugal, which will be another important moment for driving forward collective action of ocean health and ocean wealth. Next year, Palau will also be hosting the 7th Our Ocean Conference 2020, and I recognize Secretary John Kerry, who is here with us, whose vision has created an annual event that convenes ocean leaders and innovators like yourselves to share best practices, build new partnerships, and accelerate momentum towards a sustainable ocean economy. And in 2020, we will end with a convention on biodiversity, meeting in China, where we all will be setting out a shared biodiversity goal for the next decade. While we have made progress in the decade since the Aichi targets were agreed, we need to go further and should seek to achieve protection of 30% of the world's surface area by 2030. We are indeed on a shared maritime journey, but it is only by balancing our ocean wealth with our ocean health that we can ensure that our voyage ahead will be as smooth as possible, and that we are prepared to navigate the challenges that lie ahead. We are, after all, in one canoe. We have one destination. All our paddles are up in the air, needs a little bit of balance, so we can navigate to our destination. An ocean that we hope our children will, and in 25 years' time, harness, thrive, and benefit from it just as much as we have for generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now to move back to the Atlantic, to Barbados, it is again a great pleasure to welcome to address you Her Excellency Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson.
Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Mayor, Secretary of State Kerry, members of the panel, Excellencies all, and particularly Her Excellency Geraldine, let me start by expressing my immense gratitude to our new Irish friends for your wonderful hospitality. In fact, I couldn't help but think that many years ago, people were sent to Barbados in the Caribbean as punishment. They were penal colonies, and now we have come back to receive your warmth and your graciousness. It has been a wonderful visit, and it has been particularly impressive in the way that we saw yesterday your announcement of a new relationship with SIDS and the building of a new partnership, for which we are very grateful because we recognize its necessity, and we very much also recognize the parallels between what you are doing and what we need to do, and how we can work together to achieve a better and more sustainable outcome in terms of the oceans. Barbados is a small island developing state. Our physical land space is 166 square miles or 432 square kilometers. But our maritime space is 183,436 square kilometers, and our exclusive economic zone is 70,000 square kilometers. And in fact, that mirrors what is the reality for all small island developing states, and for what you have been saying in relation to Ireland. And for us in Barbados and in the rest of the Caribbean, the challenge really is, how do we harness our ocean's wealth? We have created a vision of a romantic Caribbean, this notion of a romantic relationship with our maritime territory, a romantic view of the sea. But really, how do we create what is a sustainable blue economy for our future generations? And Barbados has just established a ministry of the blue economy because we recognize that a structured policy framework must now underpin our efforts. And what are the features of that structured policy framework? I think, first of all, we recognize that there has to be significant sustainability in our planning and our approaches. What, for instance, is the carrying capacity of small island developing states who are significantly dependent as tourism economies? What are the implications of climate change for our future, and how do we reverse, or how do we contain, mitigate, and adapt to those climate change impacts which threaten our societies, which threaten our economies? How, in fact, do we prepare for the unwanted arrival of hurricanes and the implications for our wider economies? How do we see the ocean as the next frontier of economic enterprise when, in fact, we have limited capacity to control both our physical space and our maritime space? And I think that that raises a significant question about how, in fact, you harness wealth from a resource that is so vast with a capacity that is so limited in order to be able to effectively exploit while at the same time protecting the resources on which your economic growth is predicated. There is, too, the importance of developing finance mechanisms for a blue economy, whether that financing comes in the form of blue bonds, whether we consider debt for nature swaps, or whether we develop financing mechanisms predicated on our maritime territory rather than our land space, because the mechanisms available for financing to small island developing states are limited. They are fractured, they are extremely diverse, and they are difficult to access in the context of islands which have limited capacity. They're difficult to access because the procurement mechanisms and the access mechanisms are difficult. And it is I think, important for us to start to look at the crafting of mechanisms which will allow us not only to use our maritime territory based on its vast size to determine what we might be able to access in terms of concessionary financing, to consider what are the vulnerabilities which have to be taken into account when you determine the wealth and the well-being of a small island developing state and its population, and when you determine how you maximize the opportunities available to your populations. But harnessing ocean wealth also means protecting resources. And in that context, we need to redefine our relationship with the ocean. Our approach has been largely exploitative rather than protective. And I think that it is incumbent now on us to build the kinds of relationships to which Ambassador Olai spoke so eloquently in the whole context of protection. And finally, what are the kinds of trainings that we need to do to prepare citizens for careers that are ocean-based? Because that is not something that we do. We don't train for the ocean. We don't, and we haven't started yet, a process of mapping or marine resources. We haven't started to consider how we might partner with countries like Ireland and others that are doing work in the maritime space. And if in fact the ocean is going to be the next area of economic entrepreneurship and economic enterprise beyond fisheries, how do we research, identify, and protect what could be the minerals and maritime resources which exist within our space and of which we are totally unaware? How do we control when already we are losing control of our fisheries resources because of the capacity of others to come into our space and take resources without our having proper control of it? The harmonization and the maximization of these approaches is critical because across small island developing states, the need for South-South cooperation is significant. It is in that context, therefore, that I salute Ireland and the partnership to which you speak, and the opportunity for all of us to work together, recognizing that the maritime resource is very much a shared resource, and that the oceans are the lifeblood of our planet. And over and above how we maximize those resources, how we harness our ocean wealth, that together we need to work to protect that wealth so that future generations can benefit from it. Thank you very much.